I'll be here looking, be 30 minutes looking for it.
Okay, great. So I would like to open up in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. I bear witness that there's no God but Allah, that Muhammad is his messenger, and I would like to greet everyone in greeting words of peace. Assalamu alaikum. Okay, so I see people are coming in. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Kadira. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Sylvia. And assalamu alaikum, Sister Gail. So today we have quite a bit to get into, so we're going to jump right into it. So today we're going to be going over thematic and integrated unit and lesson planning. So I'm going to go ahead and share my presentation. Okay, let me make some adjustments because now that we actually have some participants, I would like to see you all's faces. Okay. So again, we're going to be going over thematic and integrated unit and lesson planning, and this is under the Supreme Wisdom Educational Center model. So the agenda for today, first we're going to start off with an introduction to what we're going over and the concepts that we're going over. Then we're going to get into defining what are thematic and integrated unit and lesson plans. Then we're going to actually go into steps into creating integrated and thematic unit plans and lesson plans. And then we're going to take a look at an actual unit or lesson plan under the Supreme Wisdom curriculum. And that's what SWC stands for, Supreme Wisdom Curriculum. And then in the end, if we have time, we will go over some questions from you all. All right, so for part one, introduction. And so to introduce us to this topic, we're going to have none other than the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, who's going to set the stage for our mindset when we're thinking about creating unit and lesson plans under this curriculum. So let me move it to the timestamp.
See, this is why the Honorable Elijah Muhammad advised us,
Can you all hear?
cajoled us, warned us,
Yes, ma'am.
and even begged us before it was too late. Get up and do something for yourself. So, dear sisters and brothers, in this great educational conference, I want us to look at curriculum and forget about the school system of this world. Just act as though it doesn't exist for us. And with a creative mind, now think. Under the guidance of the great Mahdi and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, just think on what they taught us. And look at what we have. And then look at what we can do if we just pooled our resources, educationally and financially, to do something for ourselves and our children. This is what Muhammad Mosque must do. We have to set the example.
And so, as you heard it from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's mouth, and just to kind of reiterate and re-emphasize what he said, I have the quote here. So let's look at what he says. He says, I want us to look at curriculum, and number one, forget about the school system of this world. So right now, coming into this workshop, we all probably had ideas of what we think education is or what our training and background in education is. And some of us may not have been formally trained in education. So we may have had maybe thoughts or misconceptions about what education is. But guess what? According to the most Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, we wipe all of that clean and we have a clean slate, and we're all starting at the same point, which is totally forgetting about this world's education system. And so I know off the back, that's a lot. That's a lot. Just imagine coming to an educational workshop and being told to forget everything you know about education. But that's what it's going to require us to do in order to open our minds into going into something new. Now he says, just act as though it doesn't exist. So if this world's education just doesn't exist, what would we have to do as far as building our own education system? We would have to start from scratch. And so we would have to start from the very foundation of what education means to us. And he tells us where we can find it. So he says, by taking a creative mind, because when you're starting from scratch, you're kind of putting yourself almost like in the mind of the originator when he made the universe from scratch. Obviously, he had to be very creative to come up with everything that we see all around us. And there's things even that we don't see that are at play in what we call this thing called existence. But he says, now think under the guidance of the great Mahdi and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, just think about what they taught us. So that right there is telling you what we should be basing our education off of, what the great Mahdi and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us. And it says, just think on what they taught us and look what we have. And then look what we can do if we just pooled our resources educationally and financially to do something for ourselves and our children. This is what the Muhammad Maz must do. So going through this process is no longer an option. It's a requirement. So when we get in our minds that it's required for us to do it, we can kind of summarize to say that it is required for us to forget this world's education. And it is required for us to teach from the basis of what the great Mahdi and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us. So with that in mind, what does that education system look like? So some things we know that we're taught by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Louis Farrakhan and Master Farrakhan Muhammad as well, is that girls and boys are to have separate schools for one another. Or at least go to school at separate times, right? So that's one thing, we have to have separate schools for girls and boys. Another thing that we're taught is that our school day shouldn't be all day like it is in this world, an 8-hour school day. We're taught that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad wants us to have 4-hour school days, right? So in order to have a 4-hour school day, how that education is going to take place is going to look totally different from what we're used to, because in a regular, I wouldn't say regular, but in America's education system, right? They go to school 8 hours a day, and then they cover what? They cover 7 core subjects every day, right? And it's about an hour to an hour and a half of instructions on those core content. And sometimes they may break it down as A day or B day, but basically they cover those different subjects, and there's really like a separate class for each one of those. But going back to what the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad wants us to have or desires for us, is that if you're going to teach only for 4 hours a day or have instructions for 4 hours a day, you might not have time to cover those core content areas the same way and in the same approach that we're used to. And so that's why we have this workshop to teach us integrated and thematic unit and lesson plans, because by integrating the subjects and teaching thematically from thematic units, we can kind of collapse the curriculum and kind of get more bang for our buck and get more information that's disseminated to the students by taking an integrated approach, so we can get all the learning that we need to get within those 4 hours. So from you all, are there any other things that we know that's distinct for the Muhammad University of Islam system, or the Muhammad Maz system, as the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan say? We know we have separate schools, right? Another thing is that we have to teach from the basis of the teaching. You don't find, there's no other school that you're going to find that's teaching what the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Master Farrakhan Muhammad teaches us. So that has to be included in our school system as well. And then the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan also teaches us that we want to teach our students in mastery teaching and learning. So that's another approach. That's a separate workshop. But these are just some things that we want to kind of make known about the way that we're supposed to be teaching in this new education system that is given to us by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and Master Farah Muhammad. Another thing is that we are taught that the students learning in the MUI system is supposed to be facilitated. So all of those things are different from this world school system or America's education system. So again, this is why it is important to follow his directives. As he said, just act as though it doesn't exist. And you're going to have to go into your creative mind to bring out something that doesn't exist. So moving on. Now that we kind of laid the foundation of our approach to it, because some things you might have heard of, but some things might be different. And another thing is that prior to this workshop, we sent out information and we didn't know what audience we would get. So I don't want to assume that everyone here is an educator or has a background in formal training as an educator. So the first thing I want to do is I want to clear some terms. So in dealing with what is a thematic and integrated unit or lesson plan, the first thing that we have to do is understand what is just a lesson plan. Now, lesson plan, this is a term, even if you're not a formally trained educator, if you've been to school or if you know a teacher, this is probably the term that you hear all the time. Lesson plan, lesson plan, lesson plan. And especially if you are an educator, when you hear lesson plan, this might be a term that kind of gives you stress. We have to turn in those weekly lesson plans on top of all the teaching that you're doing, and when can you find time? So, but this is probably the most common point of reference that most everybody have heard, but may not have understood completely. So, to define what is a lesson plan is a teacher's detailed guide for a specific class. Okay, and that's very important because when you're dealing with a lesson plan, it is literally that, a plan for a lesson. And so a lesson usually is about one or more school days. So when you're thinking of a lesson, you're thinking about that day in the classroom. So the lesson plan is going to give you a detailed guide for everything that you're going to do that day in the classroom. So the lesson plan is going to outline what the students will learn, how the teacher will teach it, and how will the understanding be measured. Okay. And so here's just an example of a lesson plan. So if you look at this image, you'll see a lesson plan is going to, have some basic things. What day is it? What class period is it? Because again, when you're thinking about lesson plan, this is an outline for what the teacher is going to be doing in the classroom on that specific day. Gives you the topic, and then further down in the lesson, see, it has the teaching and learning content. That's the what is going to be learned by the students and how is it going to be learned. Okay. And so the purpose of a lesson plan is it acts as a roadmap for instruction. Okay. So as we always say, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And so as a teacher, you want this lesson plan to keep you on track. By literally outlining what you're going to say, it keeps you on track with literally the minutes. Every minute that goes by in your classroom, you have written what you will be doing. So this is to keep us on time, because usually when you're teaching in those short time blocks, every second matters. And then also, it is used effectively by including objectives, activities, materials, and assessments. So again, all this is going into that detailed plan. So you're saying, okay, this is what I want the students to learn today. That's what you call your objective. Then you're going to say, how am I going to teach that? You will say, okay, well, I'm going to model to them, which is saying like demonstrate to them the information I want them to learn. Or say, for instance, if it's a inquiry-based lesson, you might say, well, I'll have these students participate in this inquiry activity. That's the how you're going to teach it. And again, it's going to say, okay, well, if you're going to teach it inquiry based, let's say if this is a lab, Then you're going to say what materials you're going to use. Are you going to use the computers? Are the computers going to be a part of the lesson? Or is it going to be a worksheet day where you have a worksheet? That's the material that you need before the lesson. Is this going to be, say for instance, if it's a lab, what are your lab materials? Those will actually be put into your lesson plan for that day. And of course, if you're going to say, this is what I want the student to learn, at the end of every lesson, there should be some form of assessment to gather what the students have actually learned. So in the beginning, you say, this is what I want them to learn. That's your objective setting. And then you finish it off with some form of assessment. And again, this doesn't have to be formal assessment as in the test or quiz, but just some form of checking to make sure that the students are actually getting what you're teaching. So the next term we're going to define is a unit plan. And so now this one is something that's a little less familiar to the general public, familiar to educators, but to the general public, now this is probably where people are not as familiar with. So in order to understand what a unit plan is, I think this is a very good graphic to demonstrate. So when you're thinking unit plan, a unit plan is a comprehensive outline specifically for a series of lessons. So if a lesson plan is the plan for a singular lesson for a singular day in class, a unit plan is the plan for the series of lectures. So it's going to be lessons. So it's going to be more than one lesson, a plan for more than one lesson. Okay. And so when you think about it, your unit plan, inside of a unit plan, you're going to have individual lesson plans. And so that unit plan is going to be connected by either a common topic, theme, or objective. Okay. So say for instance, if you are teaching on, I don't know, you're teaching on, give me some. What is the theme that you can be teaching on?
Rational numbers.
Okay, rational numbers. Okay, so if you're teaching on rational numbers, in order to get to rational numbers, right, that's the unit, right? That would be the topic for the unit. So in that sense, that wouldn't be a theme, but that would be a topic, rational numbers. But in order to get to rational numbers, you have to start what? At counting numbers, right? Whole numbers. And then you have to kind of clear those concepts before you get to the point of rational numbers. So before rational numbers here, there still might be multiple lessons that you have to get to before you end out with that rational number. So that's kind of how a unit plan works. It gives you a bigger picture. So again, a unit plan as a plan, just like with the lesson plan, it is a roadmap. But again, this roadmap is kind of more far reaching. It's a roadmap to give you the big picture of the unit as a whole. So as opposed to a lesson plan, which would be the lesson for that day in that class, your unit plan is going to give you the big picture for several lessons that might span several weeks or extended periods of time. So again, your unit can be weeks, unit can be months, depending on what you're teaching and the approach that you're teaching it in. And again, what goes into a unit plan? So a unit plan, as well as a lesson plan, is going to include the objectives, assessments, the essential questions, and a timeline, as well as the resources. And again, all of the things that are in your unit, right, are going to align with your curriculum standards. Now that's where we are. So if your unit plan is here, right, your curriculum standard is going to be even further up and all encompassing with the unit. Okay. So your curriculum standards in education, your standards are going to just tell you what the students are going to learn at the different grade levels. And so you're going to pull from your standards, right? And then when you're crafting your unit, you're making sure that those units are aligning with their standards and reaching the goal or reaching up to those standards. So when you're making unit plans, you shouldn't just make unit plans all willy-nilly. They have to align or reference back to a specific standard. And again, the standards come from the curriculum itself. Okay. And so now another point that I want to reference here is that even though we're not going to get too far into that, about clearing up maybe some confusion even with the word curriculum, because I hear a lot of times when conversing with people, the phrase curriculum is thrown around, and a lot of times people are using it incorrectly, because someone might say, okay, well, I need a curriculum, but what they're really asking for is just a unit plan, as in a series of lessons. Just because you put a series of lessons together doesn't make it a curriculum. A curriculum is even further up this chain, and a curriculum not only includes lesson and unit plans, and it also includes the standards, but the curriculum also is going to tell you the courses that you are to learn. So the curriculum is going to kind of be at your highest level. The curriculum is going to have courses, it's going to have the standards, it's going to include the scope and sequence. And so what is something that scope and sequence is just that scope is telling you how much is, the breadth or everything that is to be learned, and sequence is the order that you teach it in. All of these things right here that you see in this graphic are included in the curriculum. So if anything that you might reference as a curriculum does not include all of these, and at the very top, which is standards, you're really not talking about a curriculum. You're just saying a bunch of lessons. So saying that you need, as an educator, you might need like educational materials so that you can teach the class, but the lesson itself is not a curriculum. The unit plan is not a curriculum. Even if you are able to get a workbook, and even a textbook is not a curriculum. A curriculum is the all-encompassing system of what you're to learn, how you're to progress through it, your standards, your units, your lessons, and everything included. Okay. So now that we understand some of those basic terms, let's get into what we came from. And so that is learning thematic and integrated unit and lesson plans. So number one, a thematic unit plan is a series of lessons, right? That's what a unit plan is. But the activities are centered around a central theme, idea, or essential questions that integrates different subject areas. Now, this is where we kind of start to depart from like our the public educational system in America. So this is where you're actually planning a unit or a series of lessons that is not only for one subject by itself. So usually if you are a mathematics teacher, you might even do the unit planning yourself down to the lesson plans, but everything that you're teaching has to do with your subject only. But when you're thematically planning your units, you are actually bringing in different subjects. So one term we might have heard is reading across the curriculum. That's kind of the big thing in the public school system, that they really thought that reading across the curriculum or writing across the curriculum was all there was in thematic unit planning, but it's even more encompassing. So it's not just taking reading and writing across everything, because we know that, okay, well, if you're going to teach students and have them do activities, they're going to have a level of literacy to be able to comprehend the information. That's not enough. So not only do you have to bring in reading and writing together, but then also math and science, arts and culture. All of those subjects are integrated into the units that one would be teaching. So now this is where it gets a little more tricky, right? Because again, and so to some, it may even be intimidating, because you're saying, okay, not only as an educator, I have to, know my subject and be skilled in my subject, but now you're saying I have to know other subjects as well. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so the reason that we're taking this approach is because this approach helps students. Okay. So by teaching thematically, that helps the students make connections across all the different subjects that they're learning. And so you get a more holistic approach to education, and not everything just being taught kind of in isolation. And so as an educator, you have this every year without fail. There's going to be a student that's going to ask you, why am I learning this, right? When they get tired of going through the rigmarole and the stress of learning, they're going to just ask you, why are you learning this? Well, when you teach thematically, you kind of hit those points of getting students to understand why they're doing this, because not only is it connecting to the different subjects they're learning, so now it's not this jarring dissonance between class to class, right? Because when you're going from a math class to an English class to a science class, it's almost like you have to turn off certain parts of your brain in order to kind of get in the mode for the next class. But when you're teaching thematically, the lesson that one teacher might have taught in this class now connects with what you're hearing from someone else. So now you can have a really full understanding of everything. And again, it gives you a deeper understanding of those concepts, and getting that deep learning. That's how you get students to mastery level. So now, next term we're going to clear are integrated lesson plans. So an integrated lesson plan is a lesson plan that combines concepts from multiple subject areas to achieve a single learning objective rather than teaching in isolation. So again, what is an objective or a learning objective? Like we said, the learning objective is just what the student will do, will know, right, and understand. So now you're taking this out of just doing that under a single area, but now you have it as a whole. So here, when you think about it, now when you're teaching maybe an objective in history, not only are you teaching a history lesson, but also you're giving some of that scientific background, maybe some English language arts and some foreign language and religion, and you can put those all together to achieve that single objective for that lesson. So again, it might sound difficult, but it's not impossible. It is not impossible. And so this approach, again, reinforces learning by showing students how the different fields are connected, just like they are in the real world. So now that we have cleared the basic terms of integrated lesson plans and thematic unit plans, let's get into how we actually create them. And so we're going to start off with our thematic unit planning first, because again, we see how that flow chart works is that the individual lessons that you will be teaching will come out of the unit as a whole. And so if you unit plan first, really the lesson plans are easier to construct. And so that's what happens a lot of times, is that as teachers, as educators, with all that we have to do, usually we're probably lesson planning, right on the almost right before we teach, right? So that can be, you might have weekly lesson plans, or sometimes you might make lesson plans right before the day before the class. Is that but when you have unit plan ahead of time, your lesson plans are really just an outgrowth and pulling from that unit plan that you have done ahead of time. And so again, with unit planning, before we get into unit planning, I want to talk about the timing of when you're to do this. So with your unit planning, because it's so comprehensive and it's so broad and far reaching, this is not something that you want to start doing during the school year. You don't want to do this like before you teach the lesson. This is something that you want to have done before the school year even starts. And again, because this is thematic unit planning, and in order to be thematic, you have to connect all the subjects together. You also want to unit plan in congregation. So the individual teachers, if you're doing thematic unit planning, should not be unit planning for their individual classes in silos. This is something that you would do before the school year starts, maybe during the summer, or maybe, in your weeks of professional development before the school year starts. This is where you want to get this done and do it in collaboration with all the educators. So that way that all the educators can ensure that the learning objectives are present and that the students are progressing towards those learning objectives for their subject. Okay. So the first thing you're going to be doing Step one is you're going to be setting the foundation. Okay. So again, unit planning might seem hard, but if you come at it from a systematic approach, it can be done. So in setting the foundation, first thing you want to do is choose a theme. Okay. And so when you choose a theme for your unit, you want to select the theme that is engaging for the students, one, right? Because you want that buy-in from the students, but also you want to make sure the theme that you choose, you can actually connect it to all the different subjects, okay? So you don't want to choose a theme that's limited. So going back to what you were saying, Sister Kadira, about rational numbers, right? Rational numbers might be the theme or topic for a unit in math, but now if you're talking about school-wide, curriculum-wide unit planning, that might not be a theme that you want to choose for your unit when you're thinking thematically. You want to choose a theme that can touch all different subject areas. Am I raising my hand or is someone raising a hand? Because I see a hand raised.
It went up for you.
Okay. Okay, yes, I've raised my own hand. Okay, so when you're choosing a theme, it's important to think about, can this theme be branched across all different subject matters? And we're going to get into some very useful resources that the Supreme Wisdom Educational Center has as far as helping you choose a theme that can reach all the different subject areas. Okay, next step is that in your unit plan, remember, this is your big picture. You're going to define your objectives and essential questions. So again, your objectives are those specific learning goals. What do you want the students to be able to know? What do you want them to understand? And what do you want them to be able to do? Okay, that's what an objective is. Okay, and in developing those guiding questions, we'll frame the unit and connect the different subjects. So now if you know what you want the students to know, understand, and be able to do, you can frame questions that will lead the students in the direction that you want them to go in. So these essential questions, realistically, you're going to have multiple objectives, and then you're going to have multiple essential questions. But then even within that, from your different content areas, those different content areas will have essential questions, I guess I'll say, for their content, right? But it's still circulating around the same overarching thing. So this your unit plan is going to be this big sandwich, right? Think about it like a sandwich. You have your two pieces of bread, then you have your filling. So you might layer, all the different things. So in that sandwich, you're going to have a lot of different things coming out. And again, this is why you want to unit plan and collaboration, because you're going to have to touch all of the disciplines. And then last step in laying the foundation, and this is how you bring it all together. You plan back. Okay. So what do we mean by planning back? So you begin with the end in mind as far as your planning phase goes. And so usually you're going to end your unit out with some form of assessment. And that assessment, we call that your summative assessment. So your summative assessment is the assessment that you do at the end to gauge the learning process over that whole unit you have taught. So if you know how or what you're going to test the students on, now you have a better idea of what they need to know and understand and be able to do to be able to accomplish and do well on that assessment that you've set out for them. Okay. And so again, that summative assessment there's very many different ways that you can do a summative assessment. You have like a formal way, where it's a paper test, or maybe if you have students doing a project-based summative assessment, if they are going to be able to meet the parameters of those assessments, you know exactly what they need to know to get there. And again, all of your assessments and all of your objectives should be in line with the curriculum standards. Because again, the path laid out to you on how you want the student to progress is going to come from the curriculum itself. So again, there's no need to guesswork, but again, there's a lot of work, okay? And so again, some resources that you can use when you're planning these thematic unit plans are from the Supreme Wisdom curriculum, which we'll get into. So the next step in your thematic unit planning is to plan activities and resources. Now, this is the part that's probably going to take you the most of your time, because with the first part of laying the foundation, you really can kind of get those out really easy. Okay, this is a theme. These are the objectives that we want. This is our assessment, and these are some guiding questions that we're going to get there. Those can be spit out relatively easy, especially when you're dealing with the group dynamics. But now your planning and your resources is really where the rubber meets the road. And so remember, in the MUI system, as we're told by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, is that the education is supposed to be facilitated by the teachers. So again, remember, when you're facilitating education, you're really doing less and less standing in front of students and more kind of taking kind of a backseat and guiding them. So the bulk of your work as an educator is going to be in planning. And now, of course, this will look different depending on the grade level that you're teaching at, because of course, with younger students, you're going to need to do a lot of direct instruction because you're kind of giving them the basis of that information, right? They're at that low level of understanding, not that younger students can't reach the higher depth of knowledge, but they still need a base information. There's just because the goal is to get to those higher depth of knowledge skills, everybody has to start at the base. So those younger students are starting fresh. So you will need more direct instruction, direct involvement with younger students. But as you progress the students through this system, then you can start to transition to more facilitating, because they have all the base information that they need to go, and the base skills that they need to go off on their own. And so that's what you want to transition them, not only throughout the year, but you also want to transition them throughout their matriculation through the school. Okay. And so I'll say about around the time that you want to start making that transition is about middle school. By the time they're in middle school, you should be transitioning them into more facilitated, and especially by high school, you really shouldn't be teaching it out. By high school, you really should not be teaching at all. By high school, you're just planning. Give them and not saying that you totally are just disengaged with the students, but really you're there to just kind of clear up misconceptions, because by high school it should be products. And I can't spoon feed you a product. You have to deliver. By high school, you don't have to tell people what to do in the morning. You don't have to tell people to get out their materials. You don't have to tell people. You already have planned, like I said, you want them to have their IEPs, because again, in this new educational system, really only certain students that may have disabilities or things like that, accommodations, may get an IEP or an individualized education program. But in this system, everybody should have one. And so by the time you're in those upper grades, you should be more in product and project based things. There should be something that you're producing. But going back, so planning activities and resources. So the first thing is you have to select your resources. So what are your resources? Your resources can be books, videos, websites, and other materials that are relevant to the theme that you chose. And so now, in order to get that, those materials are not going to fall out of the sky. You have to do the work to research those things. This is what I'm saying. This is where the rubber meets the road, and this is probably the thing that's going to take you the most time. But just like the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said, pooling your resources educationally and financially, this should not be a problem. Number two, developing those activities. So now you've gone out and found the materials that you need, the resources, all the background information, but now you actually have to develop them. You have to make activities and lessons for them. So again, you have to plan a cross-curricular activities, and you want them to be hands-on that connect the themes, right? That connect to the theme that you're teaching. So again, this is going to hit all your different content areas. And so some of those examples are art, science, math, and literacy. Okay. So you want to actually start making lessons yourself. And then again, now that you went out and got the resources, you've developed your own activity. That's that creative part that the minister was talking about. And so now you have to build that background. You actually have to do, again, a certain level of teaching the students. But again, that's going to look different at the different stages. So again, you're going to plan introductory activities. So when you're doing these lessons, because they're thematic based, it's always good to start off with an introductory letter, and then not an introductory letter, an introductory activity that kind of presents the theme to a student holistically. And then throughout that unit, you can start going into the specifics at the specific times that you're dealing with those lessons. And so some examples of introductory activities could be short discussions, maybe like a class debate, right? Or a short video, kind of how we did with this, right? We started off with that video from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. That was the theme for how we're approaching this workshop, is what? Act like the education system that's current doesn't exist. All right. And again, by doing that introductory activity, this also kind of calls back and lets you gauge the students' prior knowledge. Okay. So all the lessons that you're going to be teaching are going to be based off of prior knowledge. So we don't just learn things and then forget them, right? How we do it in this school system. Oh, I don't remember anything. You leave school, you come back from the summer, and then you forgot everything that you learned the previous year. In this system, all of that prior knowledge is going to be built upon. So there should not be gaps in connecting that information. All right, and the last step in our thematic unit plan is implement and assess. Because remember, even though while planning the actual unit, you want to start with the assessment first, but when it actually comes to implementing and teaching that unit and delivering that to students, you're going to end with their assessments. So again, some of those mastery teaching elements is formative assessments. So what are formative assessments? Again, that's one of those teacher terms that we throw around. And so a formative assessment is just a regular check for understanding throughout the lessons, okay? So formative assessments, again, formative assessments is not the same as formal assessment, okay? Formative assessment is not the same as formal assessment. And so a formal assessment usually is kind of like some type of paper test or some type of, test like that, written exams and things like those are formal assessments. When we're talking about formative assessments, that's just saying that throughout the unit itself, you have points in time where you stop and assess and check for their understanding. So again, checking for understanding in formative assessment can be simply at the end of every unit, at the end of every lesson, you have exit tickets. Exit tickets are examples of formative assessment at the end of every lesson. Formative assessments can be simply in the middle of your lesson. You can ask the student, what did I just say? Or asking them to demonstrate their understanding. There are different ways that you can do that, but you have to make sure you're constantly keeping a temperature of what the students are actually retaining in some way. Now, that's your formative assessment. So again, then you also have to conduct a summative assessment. So a summative assessment is that end of unit assessment. So just like summation, right? When you add everything up, your summative assessment is going to be a check for their understanding at the end before you can move on. So again, Summative assessments don't have to be formal. Just because you may have done informal assessments for your formative assessment doesn't mean that your summative assessment has to be formal. So your summative assessments, some great types of formative assessments are projects, presentations, right? Outside of, again, your formal assessments. Okay. So now, this is also something that is often not addressed or kind of moved over. You should not go through all of this assessment just to say, okay, well, I taught the lesson or the unit and the student, you failed or you passed, and then just move on. There always should be a moment to check for the students' understanding by having the students participate. So the student should always have a point of reflection on how they felt about the assessment. So when you're also planning your formative and summative assessment, also include a point where the students can reflect on their own learning. Okay. So you can create those different opportunities. You can do it by surveys. You can do it by summaries or things like that, but you always want to assess. Again, some people, you can just ask the students, okay, well, the lesson was over. How did you feel about that? Those are different ways to reflect, but you always should implement some type of reflection for the student, because again, you're taking all of this data, right? So you can see how the student is progressing and how to best address that student's needs. So reflection is important, and not only should the student reflect, but also you should reflect on the lesson. How effective were you at teaching the lesson? How effective were the methods? All those things you should reflect, because once you reflect, you improve, right? And once you improve on your process, you start all over again, and then you go back to that planning phase. All right, now we tackled the thematic unit planning. Now let's look at the steps to integrated lesson planning. And so again, when you understand where lesson planning and unit planning and standards and curriculum, how they all flow into one another, what you're going to find is there's some overlap. Okay. So first, again, same thing. When you're approaching lesson planning, you're approaching it the same way. You have to start at the foundation, right? So, but again, what's the first thing you do? You choose a theme. But remember, if you previously unit plan, simply you're just grabbing from that unit plan and dropping in the theme of that unit as the theme for your lesson. The theme of the unit is a theme of your lesson. Now, if you didn't unit plan, you might struggle to come up with a theme for your lesson. And this is why I say, like, the unit planning is so important. And that's something that's a lot of times missed, because just as a educator in America's education system, lesson planning a lot of times are struggles for educators. But then you add on the top of, in the MUI system, in the Muhammad Mosque, we also have that extra requirement to somehow integrate the lessons into that, right? And so a lot of times teachers are doing this on their own, and then they're also doing it like right then and there. So when it comes time to lesson plan, it might just be a good hour of dissociating, trying to figure out what lesson am I going to, what theme or something that I'm going to tie this lesson to the teachings, right? But if you unit plan ahead of time, you're just pulling from the unit plan, because again, the unit plan is a series of lessons. The lesson plan is a single lesson. So if you've already unit planned, your lesson plan is literally just drag it out of here and say, okay, this is what I'm doing today, because I've already planned. So again, choosing a theme is as simple as pulling from your unit plan. So again, choose a broad topic that can be explored through multiple subjects. For example, these are some good themes coming right from our lessons. Student enrollment, rules of Islam. There are themes in the student enrollment, because why? You can connect that to many topics. One, when you look at the student enrollment, it tells you who's the original man, tells you who's the colored man, tells you the population of the original color of the people, right? It tells you about the different religions. And then also what? Gives you some facts. It tells you about the square miles of the planet Earth. So just hearing that, you can just see all the subjects starting to come out. So that's a very full. So now, so when you hear the minister say, like, forget everything, you're like, hold on, minister. You're not teaching. You don't know what my life is. But if you just submit, you will see that he's leading you to that well, right? That cup that overflows. Because I have to calm down. I'm starting to get excited. But just listening to it, you can, if you have a creative mindset endeavor, the ideas just start to flow out. So him guiding us to what Master Prophet Muhammad, Most High God Muhammad taught us, he's guiding us to something that is truly dense and that really, this a well that really hasn't been plumbed. The depths of it haven't been plumbed. Some other, again, we're at the Supreme Wisdom Educational Centers workshop, right? We're teaching about the Supreme Wisdom curriculum. So the Supreme Wisdom, the problem book. The problem book is full of stuff. The problem book talks about health. The problem book talks about finances. The problem book talks about engineering. The problem book talks about everything under the sun. The problem book talks about farming, astronomy. It's just rich, right? Then English lesson number C1. That's the theme, right? But in the English lesson number C1, of course, you're going to say, okay, well, English, right? But then when you read through the English lesson C1, it talks about the uncle of W.D. Farr doesn't know his own language, can't speak his own language, right? So obviously, if he's speaking English, and English is not his own language, that includes what? Foreign languages. So again, this is how you pull from a theme, right? And then you pick a good theme that can touch all the subjects. But again, English lesson number C1 talks about receiving work for gold, right? So that's economics. There English lesson, it's so many things, but as you can see, choosing a theme is as simple as, again, at this stage in lesson planning, pulling from your unit plan. And again, formulate your essential questions. But guess what? Like we said, we've already put out all the essential questions in our unit plan. So we just pull from that essential question for our lesson and just pop it right there into our lesson plan. And I'll show you what I'm talking about once we get through this particular section. Step number 2 are to set our objectives. Again, guess what? Our objectives come from where? It comes from our unit plan. It's already done. So literally just drag and drop, pick the objective that's relevant to the unit that you are teaching that day. And again, that's going to tell us what the student should be able to understand, know, and do. And again, making sure that those objectives align with our curriculum. But guess what? Since we have a curriculum that has standards and we've developed our units based on those standards, which is aligned with the curriculum, and then our lessons come out of that unit plan, everything is already in alignment for us. So every lesson plan should have these things. And I'm going to show you every lesson plan. It doesn't matter what system you're going to teach. They're going to ask you, what are your essential questions? What are the objectives for the day? And what are the standards that they align to? Okay. And so now I'm going to have to stop sharing for a second. I see it's 1:57. I promise you we're getting somewhere. We're almost done. We're more than halfway through. But I want to show you some examples to show you that this is absolutely in line. And so this one of the documents, this is actually a lesson plan that I had when I was teaching in the public school system. And so here, a lesson plan again, this is kind of a lesson plan for the week. So it has Monday through Friday. So in each day, right, it's going to ask you, okay, what are you teaching for the day? What's the unit? What's the theme? What's the unit? What's the concept that you're trying to learn? What is the phenomenon? It's like, okay, well, what specific, that's something later. But again, performance expectation. Performance expectation, that's like, what should the student be able to do by the end of specifically this unit? So this kind of covers the unit thing. Then this is your lesson for what? Lesson for the day. Your lessons are your daily things. So again, your focus questions are the same as your essential questions. Your objective for the day and what is the standard. You're going to have that across every lesson plan. Then you have your exit slip. That's like, what is your formative assessment for that lesson? What HOT hot questions? That stands for your higher order thinking questions. What are your assessments? Link to rubric. See, this is what, look, materials. How are you, this is how you're going to teach the lesson. This is what you're going to teach. These are the standards that your objectives line with. Okay, well, what materials do you need? This is a lesson plan. Okay. Lesson plan takes on many forms. However, again, we're talking about in the supreme wisdom curriculum, right? That's what we're here for. So how is that going to look in a thematic and integrated sense? Here, this is from the Supreme Wisdom Educational Center and the Supreme Wisdom Curriculum. Here is an outline, right, for how you do your unit plans. So again, unit plan, what's your theme? You've already planned that with your group at the beginning of the school year. So this is something you'll fill out. What level are you teaching at? Or this would correspond to grade level. What unit are you in? Right? You see 1 through 4. So again, in the Supreme Wisdom curriculum, we suppose that we're going to have 4 units for the whole year, right? We teach all year round, and then we will have 4 10-week units, right? So this would just tell you, okay, we're in unit 1, 2, 3, or 4. Then here are your different core contents, which we'll get later. But again, these are your assessments. When you're unit planning, what did we say? Plan with the end in mind. So as you're filling this out, you're doing all the hard work ahead of time, and here are the resources, right? Didn't we say these were the steps to making a thematic unit plan? It's all right here. All you have to do is bring a little creativity to the endeavor, but it's already lined out. And again, now that's the unit plan, right? That covers is cross curricular, right? For week 1, you still have to, how you're going to touch all these different content areas. Week 10, but now this is a template for your lesson plans. So again, same thing. What's the theme for your lesson? The theme for your lesson is going to be the theme for that particular unit. Okay, remember, so the duration of your lesson, is this going to last, is it a 1-day lesson, or is it a multiple day lesson? You know, lessons usually are about 1 day, but they can go more than 1 day, but again, usually 1 to 3 days. You really don't have lessons that stretch that long. What level you're teaching at, again, you already have done that in your unit planning. So now when you get to your weekly lesson planning, you're recalling to the pre-planning that you've already done. So now this is particularly for the subject of the School of Theological Studies. These are different notes you can put. These are different, say for instance, you might say, okay, well, I know that such and such student learns better this way, or this is where you put your reflection notes. This is your materials needed. Again, setting your objectives for your lesson. Where are your objectives coming from? Your objectives are coming from your unit plan. And your unit plan is that bigger comprehensive roadmap that's going to lead you. Assessments, quantitative written resources, it's all here. Even down to the gender of the students. This is what a thematic, integrated lesson plan would look like. It may look like a lot because it is. It is a lot. However, it can be done if you plan accordingly. And it's hard to think about doing this if you're still trying to do it in the old paradigm. If you're thinking about doing all of this, teaching 8 hours a day, really no break in between, and you're trying to plan all of this out a week in advance, right? Have no idea where you're going, somehow integrate the lessons and teachers in this, how you're going to get all of this done. You have to switch your paradigm. You have to move towards the model of education that has been given to us and implored by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and Master Prophet Muhammad, in order to get this done. As they say, you can't put the proverbial new wine in the old wine skin. So the first thing, really, even the first step before all those other steps is to what? Forget about this world's education system, act like it doesn't exist. That's what it's going to require you to bring to this. But now, let's get back to our presentation. Right. So now, get down to step 3 in our integrated lesson planning is to design our activities and assessment. So again, creating activities, this is just what you're doing on the daily basis. But again, all of this is already done. So as we can see, there is overlap in unit and lesson planning. There is overlap because it's designed to overlap when you plan properly. And is designed to actually make it easy for you. And that's why I always said, most people are familiar with lesson planning, but not so much with unit planning. But if you unit plan first, lesson plans will flow. So you design your assessments. So again, your activities, what are you going to be doing in the class? You have to bring some creativity, but you've already sourced your resources and did all that in your unit planning, design your assessments. It's already done. You've already done that before the year even started. And then now here's the part again, while designing and planning aside, you still have to make sure your lessons are integrated. Okay. So it does no good if you're going to go through all this work on thematic unit planning, but still only get in your class and teach math. In this world system, even before you get into the classroom, when you're getting your formal training as an educator, they teach you in silos, right? They teach if you're trying to get certified to be a math teacher, you go when you're in school, you go through math education. And then in order to get certified, you have to take a math exam, right? But in our system, if we are going to teach this way, again, as a single educator, you're going to have to be well versed in all the subjects. You know who's well versed in all subjects? Yeah, Minister Louis Farrakhan, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Master Prophet Muhammad. Those are our examples, right? As a student, each individual student has to go to class and learn each individual subject. So how are we to expect the student to be well versed in every subject and we're not? I'm telling you, it's the funniest thing. If you ask an English teacher to teach math, they probably start crying. And vice versa. But we have to come out of that paradigm, forget it totally, act like it doesn't exist. So again, the hard work as educators in this paradigm, see, when you're responsible for doing all of these things, you're going to have to change the way you approach education as a whole. And we know that the Honorable Minister Farrakhan at some point used to study for 9 hours a day, right? So that just lets you know how much is involved in making this paradigm shift, but it is possible. Why? Just like he told us to be the example, he's leading by example, by being the example. Okay. So, integrating the subjects, what are some examples? Say, for instance, for your if you have the students doing a history project, right, as an assessment, then as a part of their project, not only do they have to do research, but maybe you make them write, some type of paper, but then also create a visual aid or some type of visual that's related to that project that you have them doing. That's a way of integrating. And that's another point. When we're talking about teaching integrated lessons, sometimes you may not be able to hit every single subject area or discipline in a single lesson. That is okay. But as a unit, your unit will have touched every subject over time. Because again, in this paradigm, we're used to students having to take a class in every subject every single day. You really want these lessons to be natural. You want them to kind of flow. So sometimes, in that particular lesson for that day, it might not be pertinent to the objective for that day to approach it, or really have heavy emphasis on certain subjects. So again, that's what having to get out of the mind of this educational system and come into the new. And so again, as educators, if the students can tell that you're having some, issues with connecting everything, correlating all those different subjects, they can pick up on it too. So sometimes that's what I'm saying, you want the lessons to kind of flow naturally. And so now when it comes to integrating the subjects in your lessons, this is another resource that I would like to share that has been produced by the Supreme Wisdom Educational Center in the Supreme Wisdom curriculum. Let me actually stop sharing because this is very important. Because I'm trying to get you to see that this is doable and you can start doing it now. Don't wait. Do it now. Okay. So now when we're talking about integrated lessons and being able to connect and find the different subject areas in your lessons, the Supreme Wisdom Educational Center has produced, as part of the Supreme Wisdom curriculum. Remember, curriculum is the big broad in lesson and unit plan are way down at the bottom, but they are outgrowth of the curriculum, is a correlation between the lessons and the different subjects. So here, this is a correlation between, so MT, how you would read this document is MT stands for mathematical theology. That is one of the subjects that is taught in the Supreme Wisdom curriculum. So MT is a shorthand for mathematical theology, and AF stands for actual facts. Okay, so this is saying trying to connect actual facts to the mathematical theology, right? This is how you integrate into your lesson. So now from this actual fact, and this is actual fact number one, the total area of the land and water of the planet Earth is 196,940,000 square miles. So from that, teaching in math, you can connect counting numbers, addition, place value, measurement, orders of magnitude, exponents, abjad, gematria, numerology, algebra, geometry, area, sacred geometry, right? Those are all math topics that can be connected to the actual. So if your theme for actual facts, for your theme for that unit is actual facts, you can connect math to that. Now let's go further. Let's get out of mathematical theology. Let's get here into mathematical language arts. That's another one of the subjects that are taught. So mathematical language arts, I want to go here. So mathematical language arts, this is MLAS, and then ISN4 stands for instructions. That's coming from the instructions to the laborer, number 4. So if that's your thing, right, the instructions to labor, then here we go. The laborers must practice the above language with all new converts. The laborers are liable to punishment if found using baby language at any time. The laborers must greet a registered Muslim in his own way. From that theme, if you choose this as your thing, you can connect language arts to this through phonics, grammar, pronunciation, use of words and syllables, grammar, reading comprehension, spelling, etymology, word origin, handwriting, sentence diagramming, speech, and oration, punctuation, capitalization, composition, writing, right? Writing to various audience, technical writing, creative writing, speech, debate, speaking in people's language. So you see how by following the dictates of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, what did he say? He said, bring a creative mind to this, right? He guided us to where all the stuff is, all the source, and you have to bring creativity to see it, but it can be done. So for you, if you want to start lesson planning now in this way, here's another resource that's provided by the Spring Wisdom Educational Center. All right, back to our presentation. So now on to the good part, right? So you said, okay, I hear you, but it's not, I'm still having a hard time getting it. I'm kind of seeing it. I may leave a little bit more, but here is an example. This is really our last part. And so now here are some examples of Supreme Wisdom Curriculum, SWC, unit plans, real life unit plans. So one may ask, what is a Supreme Wisdom Curriculum lesson? Well, we've already done the base of clearing some terms, so now we really should understand this definition. A Supreme Wisdom Curriculum lesson plan is a thematic, integrated lesson plan that is based on the Supreme Wisdom lessons. Right? Seems simple. Now let's see how that will work. So first, a little background is that, and we've already kind of touched on it, but now let's kind of clear it up. So in the Supreme Wisdom Curriculum, we have, remember, curriculum is way at the top. We said curriculum is going to tell you the courses that are to be learned, right? The levels that is to be taught at is going to outline the standards and objectives for those different grade levels and how the student is going to matriculate through that system. So in the curriculum, which is the proper term, a workbook is not a curriculum, a textbook is not a curriculum. A curriculum is a curriculum. In the curriculum, there are 9 schools of study or 9 different core content areas. Number 1 is theological studies. Number 2, mathematical theology. That will correspond to what this education system calls math. Number 3, mathematical language arts and sciences. This would be your ELA, right? Just to correlate it for you. Then number 4, sacred sciences. That'll be your science courses. Number 5 is true and proper history. That'll be your history courses. Number 6, how to eat and think to live. You're not going to find that anywhere else but here. Self-improvement. Come on now. And this is core content. This is not electives. This is the core. Number 8, nation building skills and vocations. And number 9, arts, culture, and general civilization. So if you look at just those course titles, this is coming, all of this was gleaned from that little book of lessons called the Supreme Wisdom. By following the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's dictate of bringing creativity and pulling out educational and financial resources. And it wasn't done with a lot of resources, money-wise or even people-wise. And now this is how we correlate them. So even though these are all different subjects, they are anchored in growing out of the Supreme Wisdom lessons themselves. And this is how we should understand education. In the Muhammad University of Islam system and under the Supreme Wisdom, we should not take core content and sprinkle some Islamic terms on top. We should not teach math and science and English, right? And then instead of calling the little boy in the problem Johnny, call him Jaheen. That is not what the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and Master Fard Muhammad implored us to do. You don't just change the name, right? But you are literally teaching from the foundation of the supreme wisdom first, and then extracting the wisdom out of it. Okay? So now that we understand the different how the curriculum is set up, what it is designed to teach us, then we look at how do we go into our unit planning. So when we look at the supreme wisdom, just like the supreme wisdom starts with student enrollment, that would be a good place to start when it comes to planning in this paradigm, is to start with the student enrollment. So again, the student enrollment of Rules of Islam is the entry point to the curriculum. That's the best place to start. That's the best place to start. If the guide started there, I think that's where we should start as well. So again, the student enrollment is 10 questions and answers that is given to every person who is considering becoming a member of the Nation of Islam. So let's look at what the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad has to say about the student enrollment, since we're saying this is a good place to start. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad says of the student enrollment, we teach the universe. You have a lesson that is given to you in Islam called, hold on, I gotta move this out the way. Okay, I'm trying to find my person. Called, entitled, student enrollment. You must know the answer to these questions before ever you will be permitted into the hereafter. There are 10 questions. Why are there 10? Because we had 10 questions in the universe. The universe is the Big 10. This is our lesson, the universe. So again, just like Minister Abel would say, may Allah be pleased with her, is that I just love the way the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad speaks because it's so mathematical. So when you break this down, there are some very key prepositions. And so he says, what? You must know the answers to these questions before you will be permitted into the hereafter. So that gives you an idea of the order that it should be taught in. So this is where we should start first, just like he said. And again, he says, because they had 10 questions in the universe is the Big 10. This is our lesson. And in any lesson plan, what do we say we have to have? We have to have a theme and what? Essential questions. It's all right there if you understand. So let's take a look at not only the student enrollment being the first, but let's look at the first question. So the first question to answer, which is what? Who is the original man? The original man is the Asiatic black man, making only cream and planet of God of the universe. So this question to answer is our theme in this example. We're going to take that as a theme, okay? And like we said, the difference between a theme and our essential questions, our theme is kind of that overarching thing that connects all of the subjects that we are teaching, right, in our curriculum. And this theme has to be aligned with our standards. And then our essential questions are going to be guides to how we can take that theme and guide it to our objectives. Okay? You're trying to get the student from point A to B. Okay? So our theme, even though who is the original man is a question, it's not our essential question, it's our theme. Our essential questions are further guiding questions that will, once we have developed our objectives, will lead us to our objectives. Okay. So this question is in the middle of our Supreme Wisdom Curriculum lesson diagram as such. So now let's take that same thinking of now we're going to put that question as our central theme in the middle, And then we're going to outgrow into our different subjects and see how we can correlate all of our different subjects to that theme. So first, when we're making our theme, and we've already seen our theme template, our unit plan template. And so that's our theme. Pop that into your template. Okay. And so from there, we're going to plan thematic units for instruction for students that allow multiple opportunities to explore repetition and practice. Those where our individual lessons are going to be interspersed. Okay. This is just kind of general, big picture. Then we said that the unit plan is going to have a what? It's going to outline a timeline. For this one, for this demonstration, let's just say this unit is just 1 week time, right? And then this is for the grade level. So not only the time, but you also have to specify what level are you teaching this to. So this would be first to second level. So in this paradigm, we don't call them grades, call them levels. So this will be your early, lower, younger students level. And then again, what are the resources? What are the materials you're going to get? What are the materials you're going to use to be able to achieve those objectives that you set out in your unit? Okay. So again, to teach this unit, you'll need some styrofoam spheres of various sizes, periodic table, a world globe, string, measuring tape, potting soil, navy beans, styrofoam cup, plastic bags. You kind of see where this is going, right? Because if you're going to be talking about who is the original man, right? We know that the originator created some things in the beginning. And so, what was his first act of creation? That's not a rhetorical question. I want to know. Somebody.
Self.
Okay. But after, you're right. You got that. What was after himself, after his self-creation? What was next?
His second self. The woman.
That's right. And then after there was that duality came what? What do you think all this has to do with? Spheres of various sizes.
Making planet. Yes. It's a sun.
There you go.
Mhm.
See, so now you see how you can take these. And now what we're going to get into is an actual lesson that deals with that theme for that subject and then how it can be integrated. It's a very brief lesson, but this was something that was actually used. Okay, this is going to be after this. So now this is just an example of how you can take that theme, who is the original man, and extrapolate it out to the different subjects. So we already outlined 9 core subjects, theological studies. So theological studies, we can deal with who is God, which is the most important question one can ask. Mathematical theology, we can deal with spheres, circles, circumferences, diameter, pi, right? See how those materials are being used. Mathematics, mathematical language arts, the verb to be. Because we're taught that, Allah said be, and it is. So we have to understand what that verb to be means and how to conjugate it, right? To be in past, present, and future perfect. Sacred sciences, the atom, because we know that he's what? He said he created himself from an atom of water, right? So atom, which is the building blocks of matter. And then you put atoms together and then you get molecules. And then again, water in and of itself is a molecule. So think on that. That's a good introductory conversation with the students to think about that. But water is the universal solvent. And that's what Allah made himself out of. True and proper history, the history of the universe, right? We teach that the universe is at least 76 trillion years old, but the devil teaches that it's 4.5 billion. So how old really is the earth, right? History, geography, the root of civilization, right? Because once he's made the sun, then made the planets later, I'm pretty sure he was on a piece of it, right? So what is the root of civilization? How to eat to live. How to eat to live according to the math from Muhammad. How does how to eat to live tie into this, right? Again, the sun is the germinating principle for all life on earth. So all the food that we eat, right? The plants that we eat get nourishment from the sun. So it's right in there in that self-creation. He needed to make that sun so he could eat, right? And see, and all other types of stuff. Self-improvement, rising above emotion into the thinking of God. Allah had to really overcome some emotion to make something out of nothing, right? Which is what we have been tasked to do in this education system. This is all dealing with who is the original man. Nation building and vocation skills, agriculture, right? Growing the Navy bean, going back to the how to eat to live, grow the Navy bean, right? We know that that's the best of foods to eat, right? Then it again, that's still cross-connecting and it's tying into what? How to eat to live. Because after you grow the bean, you have to, right? Then there's certain nutritional benefits. And then again, arts, culture, and general science, the music of the spheres. We know that everything in the universe rotates, right? It moves. And when things move, it vibrates. Sound is a vibration. There's a spectrum of it that as humans can pick up, right? And hear. But there are still sounds that's going all around just because we can hear them, they're there. So everything makes music. It's about being tuned into that music. So this is how you can take that one theme, who is the original man, and expand it. All of that might not be readily apparent to somebody from this world, but if you're going to the mosque, you're going to the mosque on Sunday, going to study group, going to your Wednesday classes, going to MTFY classes, you're getting all these pearls of wisdom when you're constantly engaged in the teachings. Because the minister and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, Master Muhammad spoke on all of this already. You just have to go and find it. And if you're not in tune with that, or that's not something that you listen to or subscribe to, it'll be hard for you to do this. So again, that's a requirement that you have to be well versed in this. But this is the lesson that I was speaking of, and I'm serious, I'm closing out, is who is the original man? But this lesson specifically is the son, the originator's second act of creation. Outside, we just gonna say like he was himself when he created himself, Brother Halim. So we're just gonna start at like number 2 as the second self, kind of the second and number 2 kind of line up. So the son is the originator second. I'm not going to teach this lesson, but I'm just going to kind of move through it to show how you can make this into interesting and engaging lessons for the student. And this would be a perfect example of like your introductory lesson to the unit, right? There will be more lessons subsequent to this, but this is a nice introductory to that concept of who is the original man under the School of Sacred Science. So again, the son is the originator's second act of creation. Here is what the student will learn. What the student will learn are your objectives. So you set that out in the beginning. So what will your student learn? How is the son created? Right? That's the learning goal for that lesson. And this is a very short one, so this is probably about 1 day. So now this is just taking straight from the flag of Islam, right? So the flag of Islam by the Most High Black Muhammad, flag of Islam given by Allah God, to the lost and foundation of Islam represents the sun, moon, and star. The sun consists of fire, right? Which is 853,000 miles in diameter and on average 93 million miles from the earth. Even though we're dealing in science, I hear some math going on, right? I hear some astronomy. I hear a lot of things going on. Then also, when you're dealing in fire, right? Fire is not matter, it's energy. So when you're talking about the interplay between matter and energy, that's physics, right? The sun controls 9 planets with the light and heat, which gives the planet energy and life. It represents freedom. So when you're talking about freedom and the concept of freedom, now you're getting into your politics, right? Freedom. So again, the significance of the sun in our flag is that freedom of light, warmth, and heat, and the vitamins of life. Now you get into your nutrition, how to eat to live. Allah God uses the sun to condemn slavery, right? Slavery, that touches on economics as well and politics, geopolitics, right? So when you're talking about slavery in the terms of chattel slavery, is that what you're talking about? Or are you talking about slavery in terms of indentured servitude, maybe like in the Roman Empire, how they had slaves? Or are you talking about slave to mental slavery, death, and suffering, which is a more effervescent concept, right? Which now you're getting into your theological studies, right? The truth shall set you free. What is the truth? This represented by the red color of the flag. Oh yeah, remember this is level 1 and 2. So now when you're dealing in the red color of the flag, now you're dealing in colors. Is red a primary color? No. So that's a whole lesson in color. What makes the color, right? And so and then also when you're dealing in science, when you burn, right, different elements, they give off different, it's so much stuff. You remember in that the materials that said you need a periodic table? Because you can identify the element by how it burns. When you see a star that may be blue, that lets you know something about the temperature of the star and its content. So there's so much stuff in that. It represented by red flag, total background of the flag. The fact that we are offered the sun in our flag means that a lot of God's offering us the entire universe of man. Even that concept, the universe of man. Now you're getting into the sacredness of the sacred sciences, as above is below. Man is the universe, the microcosm and the macrocosm. So again, the properties of the sun: freedom of light, warmth, heat, vitamins of life, source of our eyesight, right? Master of germinating all seeds. That good Navy bean that we want to grow, you have to understand how the earth, sun, and moon system interact to sustain life on this earth. That's getting into your vocational skills. Reading farmers' almanacs, right? Planting seeds and keeping rotation. We know that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has instructed us to give a bag of beans to anybody who's on the believers that's on those SNAP benefits. Right down to the modern time. You have to know something about the sun, right? And come on now. So, fun fact about the sun is 853,000 miles in diameter. Light travels at 186,000 miles per second, right? Per second squared. That's that physics and the good old units. 93 million miles on the sun, from miles from the earth on average, right? Math. Average. Right? What is an average? How do you calculate the average? 27 million degrees Fahrenheit at its core. The sun is a huge glowing sphere of hot gas, right? Now you get into the states of matter. Most of the gas is hydrogen, about 70%, and the helium is about 28%. Now you're getting into percentages. That's the more math. But then also there was a percentage of dissatisfaction, that Yakub was born out of. Percentages. You can connect this all over the place. So, and again, this is your Big 10, the 9 planets and the sun, right? That's what the message said. There's big. He said there's 10 problems in the universe, right? And one of those problems right here is Pluto. You see Pluto with the asterisk. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad says in this book that Pluto is a sign of us. And here is Pluto being downgraded from being a planet according to this world. So there's so much in there that you can research into. There's a history behind the discovery of Pluto. There's a science and a math and even so many things that you can extract from these lessons that may seem simple on its appearance, but in order to get it, you have to bring, number one, forget everything you know about education in this world and act like it doesn't exist. And then you have to come from this first. You don't put stuff on top of what God says. Right? That is our base. And then we outgrow from there. So again, this is just more of the lesson, how you can tie that to the self-improvement study guides. He was the light of himself and had light in himself. Since the basis of his light is electricity, he had light in himself. From his own brain, he envisioned the sun and then called it to existence. So that tells us about our power, right? This right here is what we've been asked to do with this education system. Is to use that power, that light in our brains to come up with something that hadn't existed. But you have to be rooted in this to be able to mine it out. So, way over time. Hopefully you're not mad at me. I knew it was going to take a lot. But to review, as we wrap up and get to a close, is that again, remember, In this system, we are going to be teaching thematic units, integrated lessons. And so this is just some of the steps. You can do this now. You don't have to wait. You can do it now because you have everything you need. If you have teachings in a creative mind, right? But then you also have the resources that not only the Supreme Wisdom Educational Center has been able to produce, but also, again, pooling those resources educationally, like Honorable Minister Farrakhan commanded us to do. This can be done. So again, remember with thematic unit planning, first you set the foundation. You have the template, you have the outline. All you have to do is drop it in and collaborate. Choose a theme. Make sure that theme is able to be far-reaching and can touch all subjects. Define your objectives and essential questions. And again, your objectives must align with the curriculum that you choose. Now, the Supreme Wisdom Educational Center has produced a Supreme Wisdom curriculum, a proposed Supreme Wisdom curriculum, let me say it like that. But at the same time, you may have a curriculum that you're working with in your city, and you may even be trying to align it with your state curriculum and standards, which is fine, which is fine. You have to do what you have right now. But the thing is your whatever your objectives has to align with the curriculum and the standards. And again, remember, plan backwards. Start with your assessment in mind, specifically your summative assessment. What do you want the students to be able to do at the end of the unit? This is how I'm going to test them. So if I know how I'm going to test them, I know what they need to know to pass that test, right? Plan activities and resources. So first you have to select the resources. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is that thing that takes a lot of time, which will be best done in together, is that you have to research. You have to research those resources that align with your standards and your objectives. Then you have to develop those activities out into actual lessons, right? Those are your daily things that you're going to be doing, and then build that background knowledge. You do have to impart this information to the students at some point. Again, younger students are going to require more direct instruction. By the time as they matriculate through the system, they should be becoming more independent. And by the end, they should be producing some type of product. Implement and assess. Remember, you always have to take the temperature. Are the students actually meeting the objectives? If you say this is what the students should be able to do by the end of this unit/lesson, you need to check to see if they are doing that, hitting that mark by the end of that unit/lesson. And so we do that by taking formative assessments with those regular check-ins throughout the lesson, and then conduct your formative assessment at the end. Your summative assessment at the end. Remember, formative is not formal assessment. Formal assessment is, written assessments, paper-based, and things like that. But you can have creative assessments. Just make sure those assessments align with your standards and curriculum. And then again, always include some opportunity to reflect. And then from those reflections that you get from yourself and the students, you synthesize that, and then you go back to the drawing board in your planning process, and then update what you have. The idea that we're supposed to have some type of stagnant curriculum is that's the way of this world, right? They feel like you should just teach the same lesson over and over again every year. But in this system, again, when we're constantly in motion, we're constantly developing, we constantly are updating and things like that. And again, now for integrated lesson planning, remember, this works best when you already have unit planned ahead of time, particularly before the school year started. And then you're just pulling from your unit plan that's already pre-prepared to develop your lesson plans for the daily activities. And so same thing, plan your foundation by selecting the overarching theme and formulating your essential questions, which is coming from that unit plan. Set the goals and objectives. So you're defining those learning objectives and then making sure they're aligned with your standards. And again, designing those activities and creating assessments. Activities or what you're going to have the students doing in class, and your assessment is how you're going to evaluate them. Are they hitting those objectives that you set out, and making sure that you're actually integrating subjects and not just teaching one subject, because it defeats the purpose. So with that being said, I would like to greet you all in the greeting words of peace. Assalamu alaikum. And if there are any questions for me, I will take them at this time.
Also,
Well,
oh, I'm sorry, Sister Kadir. Ladies first. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Um, First, this was excellent. Praise be to Allah. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I remember hearing, learning about thematic in a way long time ago, but it wasn't from the context of the supreme wisdom, and you just articulated it so well. So my question is this, in terms of if you're a director or directors of a school, how would you recommend approaching that for your teachers and making sure that everything is in alignment? Like if you have if you have a few teachers, and although it may not necessarily be subject based in that sense, like you were saying, I imagine over 4 hours, probably won't have the same teacher throughout the day. So, how would you recommend approaching that as a directress, making sure everyone is in alignment over the same course of period of time? And also, how much time then do we spend on a subject like mathematical theology? Would it be 45 minutes? Would it be an hour? Would it be an hour and a half? What are your recommendations in that way too?
Okay, so the first thing I would implore any directress of a Muhammad University of Islam or affiliated school is that you start by presenting them with the arguments and the commands, I would say one of the commands of the Honorable Minister Farrakhan, the Most Honorable Muhammad, Master Prophet Muhammad. And if they can argue with them, as they say, don't argue with me, argue with them. So if you can tell them that they're wrong and this isn't how we should be doing and this is something I can't do, well, then that's something that, the educators in our system may need to check themselves about, and maybe this may not be the education institution for you if you refuse to follow the dictates of the men that we've been given and set out as an example for us to follow. One. But number two, when it comes to trying to, I guess, get teachers and educators on board, again, this is something that I would not necessarily require teachers to do in the middle of the school year, right? This is something that should be done when you're on break, because again, like I said, the hardest part that you're going to be doing is in the planning phase. And as far as how would the school day go, going back to this paradigm, in order to teach this, we have to get out of the idea that each class has to be 45 minutes, right? We said when you student and the idea that students have to go from one teacher to another, as they transition subjects, that is do away with that, first of all. That's what I was saying. Every educator has to be well versed in all subjects. So just like how it is in the lower education, the early childhood education where one teacher teaches everything. Right, we're used to seeing that in the earlier stages. Really, the problem where people start to fall off and get nervous is when it comes to the higher stages. But that would be kind of the paradigm where and specifically in this proposed supreme wisdom curriculum model, is that the students will stay with the same teacher for a period of 3 years before they even move to another teacher anyway. So you're going to be with one teacher all day. And that one teacher is going to address cross curriculum all the topics. And just like I was saying, it's not guaranteed that you're going to hit all 9 content areas in one day. It's going to be more of an organic, holistic approach as you're making your way to achieving those objectives. So, like I said, throw away everything that you know. It can be done.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Well, alaikum salam, sir.
Very great, very good presentation. I'm sorry I got on a little late. I will know if, with Sister Deborah's permission, can you send me the recording of this? And also, I see our director from MUI is joined on. She got on late also because I got late notice and I sent it to her, but at least she wants to come on so we can review it and then circle back.
I definitely will bring that to her.
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. I'm pretty sure she wouldn't have a problem with that.
All right. It's a great presentation, though. I'm telling you. Woo! Lord have mercy. Just the student enrollment. I mean, I was looking at the first question, boy, had me. Oh my God. Maybe I'm in the wrong. Well, I'm in the right profession, but I guess I'm in the wrong. I should have been. I should have been a classroom teacher. But anyway, classroom of God is the whole earth. But thank you,
Right.
Sister Gabrielle. Thank you so much.
Praise be to the Lord. Oh. Well, are there any more questions? And when I say really quickly, I mean really quickly. I just want to direct you all to some resources that you can take away now, which are this. Okay, assalamu alaikum. Yes, it was. Can't wait to receive. Oh, I would like to direct you all to this website because I don't want to hold on, claim that I'm gatekeeping some type of knowledge or information. So I would like to direct you to these websites and you can take them down and peruse at your own leisure. So number one is the Supreme Wisdom Educational Center.org. So this is kind of your landing site for everything. And so this they have from the Supreme Wisdom Education Center.org, there are things that are offered such as training courses, workshops, um, and things to that nature. And so you can actually sign up to be a part of the a member. There's a free membership. There are also paid memberships, but in the free membership, you will be added on to an email list and you will receive any updates or any communications about different activities that are going on at the Supreme Wisdom Educational Center. And newly open, there's a link to this. Newly open is the Supreme Wisdom Educational Center store, the SWEC store, SWEC, right? Right in Louisiana, we know about the SWAC, right? But this we're talking about the SWEC. So Spring Wisdom Education Center store, and then there are also products there, and something that, like I say, get it. This is a highlight right here. You have poster boards, classroom poster boards. That these are new items that you can get for your classroom of the student enrollment, right? Talk a lot about the student enrollment. You can have those educational resources, but then there's also certain teacher manuals. These are coming soon, and also a further workbook work. I'm not explaining, but an actual more detail because there's only so much you can get in this, but there's actually a course book for how to use thematic lesson planning and unit planning as well. And then also the SWET Teacher College. So if you are interested in being trained in the educational methods of the Supreme Educational Center, if you want to kind of going back to your question, Sister Kadira, if you're trying to get people on board, and so maybe it's just a matter of, okay, well, I want to do it, but I don't think I know how to do it. This is a workshop. This is a 1 day thing for a few hours, but you really have if you want a course in it that'll really get you off to the races, be able to implement it immediately. I would implore you to check out the courses that they have available. There are certain courses in educational leadership for your directors and directresses. Um, as well as curriculum development courses, and there's a Supreme Wisdom curriculum orientation course that'll kind of lay the foundation. So going back to making that case and making that argument of, okay, this is how you get teachers to buy in into this. I would say that's probably the best place to start with those courses. But I had to do it because I think, a lot of times, sometimes we just don't do stuff because we don't know, right? And so, Sister Kadira, I know sorry, but I texted you like right before we started, and you joined because you found out about it, right? And so you can get the benefit of it. And so, just I would be remiss if I didn't let you know those links where you can peruse those at your own leisure if you're interested. Yes, but if there are no further questions, me, I've gone over twice the time. I knew yes, oh yeah, Dr. Lee, yes, he did take the course. Brother Dr. Halim did take the course, so he knows about it. But again, it's 2:52, I knew it would be a challenge to get this down in an hour. So please forgive me, charge it to my head and my heart. I know I was told I talk fast, but obviously not fast enough to get it down into an hour. And so that's something I will work on. But I would like to leave you as I came before you all in the greeting words of peace. Assalamu alaikum.
So.
Walaikum